Okay, so I can see a few people still coming in there, but just in the interest of time and maximizing the time that we have this evening, I'm going to crack on. And I'm sure if you're still coming in, you'll be able to catch up. Uh, First of all, thank you for coming this evening to our Essential Digital Parenting webinar. It's going to be a fascinating conversation with Dr. Colman Noctor, led by our own CEO, Alex Cooney. This is part of our Same Rules campaign, which I'm sure you may have come across in some of the national media in the last couple of weeks. You may have seen it in the cinema, hopefully, if you were watching a film recently, and you may also have encountered it on the RTE player if you're watching any of your favorite shows back. This is our fifth Same Rules Apply campaign, and it has a very simple message that the same kind of common sense approach that we should take to parenting in the offline world is exactly the way that we should approach parenting in the online world as well. And we're all here this evening because we're aware of the very serious and multiple challenges that faces in 2026. So just to contextualize the webinar, I'm just going to share the video, and I'm sure some of you have already seen this. These are our two star actors that appeared in our fifth Same Rules Apply video. You may also recognize one or two other people when you watch this, and hopefully the sound is working okay. So it's only a minute long. I'm going to share that, and then without any further ado, we're going to crack on with the main event of the evening, our conversation with Dr. Colman Noctor and Alex Cooney.
You wouldn't let your kids share everything with strangers offline, so why allow it online? Remember, online or offline, same rules apply.
Okay, so a very simple message, and we hope an effective one indeed. And part of our campaign is obviously our flagship video, but what we also deliver is an essential digital parenting booklet, and as a way to kind of contextualize that and really get into some of the deeper questions around the issues that we cover in that booklet, which is available on our website, cybersafekids.ie. We are also having this kind of event webinar this evening, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to introduce Dr. Colman Noctor, who you've seen just appear on your screens there. Dr. Colman Noctor is a analytical psychotherapist and a mental health lecturer in Waterford. He is a child and adolescent psychoanalyst with over 30 years of national and international experience as a mental health nurse and psychotherapist. His special interest areas are mental health and technology and eating disorders. Colman's research area is the impact of social media on mental health, and this was the theme of his doctoral thesis. Colman is the course leader for the MSc in Mental Health Practice for Children and Young People and has been published and presented at international conferences many times in the area of child and adolescent mental health. He's also the author of two best-selling self-help books, Cop On and The 4-7 Zone, and is a weekly columnist with the Irish Examiner and host of the Asking for a Parent podcast, as well as a regular contributor to radio shows on RTE Radio 1 and Ireland AM on Virgin Media. Not a particularly impressive bio, I'm sure you will agree. Fantastic to have Colman with us this evening. And obviously he'll be in conversation with Alex, who I know just as my boss, but she is also our CEO and co-founder of CyberSafeKids. She has spent her whole career in the not-for-profit sector. After some time in Southeast Asia and the Caribbean in 2015, she returned to Ireland 2 years before me and co-founded CyberSafe Ireland, which is now known, of course, as CyberSafeKids, and is currently the CEO. CyberSafeKids is recognised as Ireland's national voice for children's online safety, and as a catalyst that convenes parents, policymakers, educators, and partners to deliver systemic change. Alex completed a QQI Level 6 Component Certificate in Child Psychology in 2019, a professional certificate in digital policy at UCD in 2022, and holds a master's degree in peace studies from Trinity College Dublin, in addition to an MA from the University of Edinburgh. So another underachiever there, as you can see. And it's wonderful to have them both tonight. And I'm going to shut up in a moment, but all I wanted just to say was that if you have any questions that you want to ask, I'm going to attempt in the background to try and answer any that I can, and then I will be able to pick one or two, hopefully, towards the end, and I'll come back in and I'll share those questions with Colman and Alex. So please feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box. I'm going to switch off my microphone, switch off my camera, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Colman Noctor and Alex Cooney. So please take it away.
Thanks so much, Philip. Thanks for the introduction. Good evening to you all, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your hectic lives to join us here this evening for what I hope will be an enlightening and useful discussion about the current challenges of parenting in the digital age. I also want to thank you all for the hundreds of questions that we've received in advance of this session. I hope that you can appreciate we can't answer every question, but what we've tried to do is kind of group by theme and to cover as much in the questions that we have and in the time that we have. I'm really delighted to be joined this evening by Dr. Colman Noctor, who is one of Ireland's leading experts working with children and families, and I'm delighted he's here to answer some of these questions. The areas that we're going to be focusing on tonight relate to the addictive nature of gaming and social media and its impacts on children's mental health, pornography and the negative emotional impact of inappropriate content on children's development and mental well-being, and the additional challenges parents are now facing with generative AI. So without further ado, Colman, thank you for joining us this evening. Are you happy to get stuck in?
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Let's go. Okay, so there are a number of parents here tonight who currently have quite young children and who have not yet faced the social pressure for their children to be online or haven't bought any smart devices for them. What advice would you have, for them thinking about how to play this out in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big questions is when do you introduce your child to technology? And the reality is children are introduced to technology almost from birth. You know, as soon as you start to navigate a smart TV or watching YouTube or whatever the case may be, children it's part of the fabric of their being, and we don't have, digital immigrants and natives anymore. We just have digital natives. And so I think the big question then is at what point do we introduce something like a games console or a phone? And the phone is really that really autonomous device that allows a child to go beyond surveillance and beyond that. And, when we were talking years ago, we used to say, put the PC in the sitting room and, you'll be able to keep an eye on what's going on. As soon as the handheld device came into play, it was a game changer. So your readiness for that, you have to ensure that your child is mature and ready and capable of managing what having that device will bring. So for me, it is about delaying that as much as possible, as long as possible. So a few years ago, we would have had this conversation and we might have been able to say, if your kid comes to you and says, 90% of the kids in my class have a phone, they're probably not telling the truth. But now, unfortunately, in many of the figures that you've done in CyberSafeKids tells us that actually, in fact, that might indeed be true, and that there is, the ownership issues are massive and that creates a kind of a social pressure. So parents are in this dilemma of, do I keep my child digitally safe, but leave them being socially isolated or oscillated from a group? Or do I, ensure that they're integrated, but also risk, what comes with owning that device? In terms of, I feel for parents in that dilemma. I really genuinely do. I think there's a huge pressure to not have your child be the one that's left out. So my advice to parents who haven't had the ownership issue yet is to try and manage the numbers. So try and get as many parents as you can within that friend group or in the school to almost agree to collectively delay the ownership as long as possible. What we do know is that children are born into the world, they're in what's called discovery mode. So they're really interested in finding out about the world and they want to touch things and see things. And you'll notice it like when a small child is small, they'll put everything in their mouth. As they get older, they'll ask why, you know, all those 5-year-old questions, or they've a hunger
Oh
to
yeah.
know about something. And the discovery mode is really important for their development. But what we do know is as soon as they get a smartphone or a handheld device, they flip from what's called discovery mode into defensive mode. And defensive mode is where I become really aware of the scrutiny and the evaluation of other people of me. And I become, it usually should happen around 15 or 16, where you start to be interested in clothes and labels and all of that sort of stuff. And you become much more self-conscious. Ideally, from a child development perspective, you want a child in discovery mode as long as possible, not into defensive mode. And so what I would say to parents is if you're thinking about answering the ownership issue or getting your child a phone, it's much more of it's a wider issue than just phone ownership and surveillance and safety. There's a child development issue here. So I would say to them is delay as long as possible, but what will make that more likely to succeed is if you can control the numbers. And I always say this, you know, if your child is the only child in fifth class without a smartphone and Snapchat, they may feel out of it. However, if your child is the only kid in fifth class with Snapchat, it's of no value to them. Do you know what I mean? So we really need, again, maybe it's a bit early in the webinar to talk about this, but collective action is key. You know, it is about trying to manage the number, trying to manage those pressures and allowing our children to develop at a rate that they should be without having to shrink childhood in order for them to fit in. So delay as long as possible, encourage play as much as possible, and be aware of what handing that device to your child may indeed bring. You know.
Yeah, and I think the really good news on that we started to see in our numbers in our last report was that the hold off movement, that's how I kind of describe it, it's pockets around the country of groups, exactly as you say, groups coming together and deciding collectively to hold off. It is making a difference. We can see it in our numbers. There was a drop off in the number of children under the age of 13 who had their own smartphone. And there was also a drop off in the numbers of children accessing social media under 13. And that is really significant. And it isn't to do with regulation. It's too early. So we do believe it's down to these hold off groups. So I would hope that gives parents listening tonight inspiration and maybe, you know, thought of an opportunity to think about, you know, who they could reach out to have these conversations. And then the other thing I hear you saying really clearly is that autonomous use. So that it's the holding off on that more autonomous, that more independent use. You know, like we had we used a family device, so the children shared a family device, so that it wasn't that their own individual device, that you know, that there's almost like a right to use, that it's a privilege to use that family device and it's a shared thing. Anyway, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Moving on, we received this is about negative influence of social media and on self-esteem and body image, which are topics that I know you've written about. How can we counter some of the unhealthy and unrealistic narratives our children are exposed to online? Things like unrealistic body image for both boys and girls, unhealthy presentations of masculinity, looks maxing for boys, the living my best life type narrative for girls, which can leave them feeling unworthy. How can we counter some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things that are important in this. Like, social comparison is different now than it was before. So from the point of view of go back to the 80s, 90s, social comparison was with celebrity. You know, you're looking at pop stars and people like that, and it's for adults as well. You know, you look at, oh my gosh, there's Victoria Beckham and she's got this fabulous mantelpiece, but she's a celebrity, so she can afford that and all that. With the influencer movement, it's very much one of us. You know, if you saw a picture of Marion in number 59's mantelpiece, it might hurt you more or affect you more than Victoria Beckham's. Do you know what I mean? So because social comparison is with our peers now, not with celebrity. And when we have the strong influencer movement, a lot of it is you can be like me. You know, you can follow me, follow my diet regime, follow my exercise regime, follow my makeup routine. And those sorts of advice they're highlight reels, and children can't distinguish between that's just a performance in front of a camera or that actually is that person's life. And so they hold themselves to that standard. You know, someone who's making videos and recording 4 or 5 videos a day and what they're doing has a huge level of investment in living their life that way. Other people don't have that time or that availability or those resources to be able to do that, but children expect that they should. And oftentimes what happens is that we look through these profiles and see compare ourselves to the highlight reel of everyone else's lives or everyone else's achievements and feel lousy about ourselves. And it's that negative feedback loop where we go looking for more. And many children, boys and girls, can fall into real echo chambers. And the more content like this you look at, the more the algorithm will send it to you. So from a boy's perspective, there's a lot of the kind of gym bro culture of, how to get bigger arms and how to get bigger chest and what your supplements you should be taking, what you're eating. And boys of 13, 14 years of age trying to hold themselves to that standard are failing miserably in many ways because they don't have that level of dedication. So the social comparison isn't removed from celebrity. It's very much peer to peer, which creates even more intense pressure. So what we have to do in this situation is work with the individual, not with the technology, in terms of trying to, your sense of self and your sense of self-worth has to be spread among lots of things. There's things you might be good at, sports, academics, creativity, whatever, but there's also qualities about how kind you are, how loyal you are, how brave you are, those intrinsic qualities, which are much more, and unfortunately, we tend to grade kids by accolades. Oh, you're very good at this, or you're very good at that, not in terms of their qualities as human beings. And we need to focus much more on those elements, so that children don't feel that there's a gap or a deficit that they need to fill with exercise, dieting regimes, whatever it might be. And much of those sorts of things are appealing to vulnerable young people. So vulnerable young people who feel overwhelmed, they seek something that will give them a sense of control. And dietary regimes and exercise regimes offer you that control. Just live by this routine, this structure, and everything will be okay. And lots of young people they'll be seduced by the clarity of eat less, move more makes I'm a good person. Eat more, move less makes I'm a bad person. And so trying to live by that clarity, and that's part of childhood. Childhood is they like very clear things, goodies, baddies, cops, robbers, cowboys, Indians, whatever it might be. And some of those extreme narratives offer that clarity. Just do this and everything will be perfect. And that's very, for a vulnerable young
Yeah.
person who really wants to feel control. So they're already vulnerable to it. And so what I would say is try and manage that level of vulnerability, enhance their self-worth, enhance their self-belief, try and feed that sense of their own value, that they can see it in multiple things, how kind they are, and if you meet somebody and they say, how's John? And don't start into, oh, he's great. He's the captain of the rugby team and he's got 6 A's in his junior cert. Just say, John's a good kid. He has lots of friends and we're very proud of him. Do you know what I mean? If John hears that rather than all the things that he achieves, it means
Yeah.
something. That stuff matters. So we need to start valuing effort, not just outcome, and really put some value on those intrinsic qualities because they're the things that are going to make you less vulnerable to those influences online.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard, isn't it, to counter something, especially when it's coming through at them in such an individualized way. I think that, the shared experience of watching something together where you kind of comment on, you might comment on someone's behavior, good, bad, or indifferent, but you lose out a little bit in these shared experiences, which I think goes back to your earlier response about that, independent, autonomous
Mm.
access, and when they're kind of developmentally ready for all that comes with that.
And again, it's personalized. That's the whole that's the
Yes.
USP. It's
Yeah,
personalized
yeah.
to your interests. So the more you like it, the more you watch, the more you'll get. And to use an example, like the internet is the greatest library in the world, but the algorithm will show you what to see. Do you know what I mean? From the point of view, it's the librarian that tells you where to look.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're handing an awful lot of control over your own exposure just to the algorithm. And if I watch a video of a girl playing an electric guitar and the algorithm says you must like that, I'll just get loads of girls playing electric guitar. Over time, I might even not think that boys play electric guitar because all I've seen is what the algorithm has given to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And I think the library analogy, but in a way it's the library analogy, but the choice taken away. So yes, the librarian might point you in certain directions, but you still can see all the other options. Whereas I think the way the recommender algorithm works, it's sort of determining what your interests are or how to capitalize on,
It brings the books out to you through a hatch.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
look elsewhere.
Mm.
Keep your eyes on me.
Mm.
Just going back to the delaying question that we talked about earlier, a number of parents have asked us about how they can tackle this with their children. To say they want to hold off, how do they do it without their children kind of resenting them? A lot of parents talked about that fear of their kids getting really upset or being really resentful because they're choosing to delay.
Yeah, if I could write the answer to that book, I'd be a bestseller. I mean, again, like parenting is one of the uncomfortable part of parenting is giving your child what they need instead of what they want. Do you know what I mean? And so whether it's they want to stay up late at night and you want to put them to bed, they want to, not go to school and they have to, all of these things that we do that they counter what a child wants. And a child wants to be part of their friend group. They want to be integrated. They don't want to be the one that's left out of that. The difficulty with the technology is that as soon as we introduce that, we introduce risk knowingly. And every parent gives their child a phone with trepidation. We hand it over with a shaking hand, and almost it's not, oh my God, you're come of age, here's your phone, you're going to be, I'm so delighted about it. And so the idea that if you are that parent who is holding the line again, going against the tide in many ways and trying to protect your child as long as you can, you will be the unpopular parent. What you can do is try and reassure your child in and of that moment, I'm doing this to protect you. This isn't to make your life worse. I'm not trying to punish you. But all of those explanations, and I'm just being honest here, Alex, a lot of them will fall on deaf ears for a child who just wants to be part of the group. And, delaying ownership past where most of their peer group is will cause disgruntlement. Do you know what I mean? But that child, like, here's a thing I hope parents will take as reassurance. No child has ever come to therapy with me because they didn't have enough technology. I've seen plenty of child come to therapy with me because they've had too much. Do you know what I mean? And so the idea that this is an uncomfortable thing and it's hard to hold that. And if you're holding the line and you see your child coming home every day, and I had a parent come to me who their child had just joined a new school and she'd gone in fifth class and every kid in that class had a smartphone and Snapchat and she was trying to make friends and she was trying to make connections and she couldn't. They were all communicating on this base, and they were, talking about what they communicated that night. And she said, "I really don't want to do it, but I don't know what to do." And in that situation, I said to the parent, "This has to be your call." Do you know what I mean? Because the numbers have become in that situation have become so powerful that this is a really difficult decision and really difficult one for you to hold. But I would think that in time the parent who is unpopular and a slow adapter and those who are slow to ownership may indeed be proved right. I think we will look back at this time, and when we say we gave children phones at that age, people will say, "What?" It'll almost be like sending children up chimneys. You did what? Because I think
Or
we're
down
in
coal
this
mines, yeah.
consensus. We're in this consensus of the given moment. Well, everyone else is doing it, so we might as well do it. But when we reflect on this
Mm-hmm.
time, we will say what, and so the unpopular parent when it comes to technology is a horrible position to be in. It's very difficult. Just keep reassuring your child of your motives are not to make their life more difficult, but to protect them. And in time, they will realize that. Do you know what I mean? What's interesting is when we asked older teenagers about 17, 18, 19 years of age about phone ownership, they will all say, we got it too early. We wish we didn't get it so, or, they don't, the 13-year-olds don't see that, but the 17-year-olds do. And in that way,
Oh, and they're, yeah.
like, they may look
I was
back
going to say
and thank you for it.
I was going to say they're often quite restrictive about their younger siblings or
Yeah.
disapproving. So if their parents have maybe given their younger siblings earlier access for whatever reason, they're quite disapproving in our experience of that. They think, oh no, it's 10 is too young for Snapchat. So it's interesting to hear voices at the different ages and stages, because obviously children in that younger age category want access to everything. Whereas
Mm.
as they get older, I think that realization that it's not appropriate always to have such a high level of access.
And again, I would say that like if you talk to, I work in third level, you talk to students about, how much would you need to go off Instagram forever? There's a few thousand or whatever the case may be. But if nobody had Instagram, how much would you need? And a lot of them would say, I'd love that. I'd love if we
Yeah,
didn't have this. Do you know what I mean? And again, I would say a lot of a lot of our emphasis is that when we think about smartphone ownership is around the kind of tabloid headings of, and these are real things, cyberbullying, grooming, predatory behavior, gambling, all of that sort of stuff. But there's a huge issue around the stress of ownership, right? I'll give you an example. The most stressful app that I have on my phone is WhatsApp, right? Because I'm part of about 20 parenting groups and football training and polls and pinging and it's the life admin involved in all of that. A child who has Snapchat and has 17, 20 streaks going at the same time, having to send pictures of the wall, having to maintain those things, not letting the 24 hours pass. And it creates a stress and an anxiety in children that of having to admin their lives through this phone that they're not socially, emotionally, or cognitively capable of doing. So even if your child has never been cyberbullied or come across any grooming behavior, the stress of that introduction, like they're the kind of unseen stresses that technology brings because the idea that um, I have to keep an eye on all this stuff and I have to manage all this stuff and I have to, so it's not necessarily always about cyberbullying, but it's the kid who has to respond to 70 Snapchat messages before they have their Cocoa Pops in the morning. That's the stress. And it's
yeah,
important to keep
yeah,
in mind that that's a risk too. It's not just the stuff where danger is one element, but our attention being hacked and taken away from us. So much so that we don't get an opportunity to grow, develop, and engage. Um, that's the unhidden cost of smartphone ownership for children too. And I think most of us would look back and say, "Gosh, I wish I didn't have this either." Do you know what I mean? The having to
yeah.
answer emails and do all of these things. This was something that was supposed to give us time, and all it has done, it seems to have taken it away. Do you know?
Yeah, and I think it's blurred the lines between your kind of when the workday or school day ends and your kind of evening begins, because we're always checking email, we're always on, and I think kids are finding themselves always on as well. I think increasingly the good news is that there are more alternatives to these smart devices with access to everything. And actually in our gadget gift guide this year, we included a section on alternatives. So if you're a parent that wants a level of connectivity, but you're not ready for all that comes with kind of full access, there are watches that you can add numbers to and contact your child and track them if they're walking home from school, for example. There are more limited smartphones like balance phones. So yeah, any parents that wants a level of connectivity without all of that comes with it, there are increasingly these other options on the market, which is great.
Yeah.
Gives more
And it's
choices.
important to state we didn't have these problems in the area of the Nokia 5210. Like there weren't kids going around with a snake addiction. Do you know what I mean? Or,
Yeah,
we didn't have these issues with the BlackBerry. Do you know, so the smartphone, the smart enabled capacity, which brings with it all the social media apps and all the things that go with it, and that portal to the outside world, that's where the problem line is.
yeah.
This isn't about texting and it isn't about phone calls. You
No, it's the addictive nature of what's on it. Um, so earlier this year, you wrote an article about how pornography is one of the most influential, and I'm quoting here from it, and unregulated sources of sexual information for young people. It acts as their first sex education teacher long before parents, teachers, or real life relationships can offer an alternative perspective. It isn't usually that they're seeking it out. It is more often that it's the algorithm driven online world, which is indifferent to age, readiness, or emotional development. So parents have asked us, how should we address this topic, porn and other inappropriate online content with our kids? Like, what sort of conversations should we be having? And maybe you could touch on kind of different ages. Like the conversation you might
know.
be having with a 10-year-old is going to differ, considerably from one you might be having with a 14-year-old.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's a case of if your child will come across pornography, but when. and I think it is that
Mm.
prolific. And it's not that your child would go looking for it. This isn't about you doing searching up pornography. It's through things that their friends are watching, or something. Even children who don't have phones or tablets are seeing pornography on their friends' phones. So a kid goes to someone else's house and they show them this stuff. And the exposure of that content to a child before they're ready has quite devastating impacts on their development. Do you know what I mean? So the, you can't unsee this stuff. And rather than
Mm.
certainly the young people that I speak to who've had exposure to pornography or illicit material, it's not that they're becoming kind of sexually promiscuous as a result of it. They become very fearful of intimacy and sexuality and growing up. And it's almost like, gosh, if that's what that is, I don't want any part in that, right? So right from the start, we need to have those conversations far, far earlier than we'd ever want to. And I want to say this, like childhood is shrinking already. I don't want it to shrink any further, but I would prefer a child to know what an intimate relationship is based on a conversation they had with a parent rather than a Google search or a friend's pornography app that someone is showing to them. So right from the start, we have to talk to children about safety and safe parts of your body that people shouldn't touch, and very even your young children around privacy and private parts and all that sort of stuff. And then as we get into kind of older groups towards kind of 10, 11, coming to the preteen piece, we have to talk about healthy relationships because adults who watch pornography know it is based on fantasy because you've had experiences of an intimate relationship and you know what it's like. And so this is a movie of something that isn't realistic. But if you haven't had the baseline experience of a normal intimate relationship, nor do you know what a normal intimate relationship looks like, this is the only template that you have, and children and teenagers especially who do not want to ask an uncomfortable question will go to Google for it. They'll now go to ChatGPT for it. But the idea of outsourcing their information, especially something that's slightly uncomfortable to have a conversation about, they will be brought to these sites as a means of um, not educationally, but they'll become their first exposure to sexuality, to sexual contact, to intimacy. So we have to give them a baseline of what it is. As they get older, and this is the most important message you have to tell children, pornography is not a documentary. It is a movie, right? And really trying to reinforce that message because that's the bit that certainly teenagers and older teens that I would talk to don't understand, that this is not a template for how it is done. This is a fantasy, right? And so
Mm.
as they get older, then it's talking about consent. It's talking about respect. It's talking about respect for yourself and for other people. And it's trying to counter the narratives because pornography plays with consent, violence,
Mm.
hostility, taboo, and there's such warped stuff out there within the pornography industry. It's all the taboo stuff. So it's stepfather, stepdaughter, all this
Mm.
sort of again, the extreme stuff that is part of the addiction, the sex addiction piece is that it's diminishing returns. You have to watch more to get the same effect. And so
Yeah.
very easily young men especially fall into the trap of developing pornography addiction where they need these dopamine hits and find themselves in very dark corners of the pornography world. So as they get older, the conversation, so you think of it as a spiral. You start and address the issues in a very basic way. A few years later, you add some more nuance and more developmentally appropriate. As they get into 14, 15, you're talking more about the potential that they might be entering into relationships and intimate relationships. And so it's consent, it's respect. And then as they get older, then you're talking about the kind of those themes that pornography tends to portray, that they are not documentary, they're movie. In the same way as you watch a feature film on Spider-Man or whatever it is, that's not a representation of real life. It's a script. Um, and many young people see pornography as a script for sexuality. This is what I need to do. I do this first and then I do that first. And they need to realize and be told that that's not it. Do you know what I mean? Without a
Yeah.
baseline real life intimate experience, they have nothing to benchmark it off. So as parents, adults and grown-ups, we almost have to be the reference point for what the healthy is, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The kind of real and not real.
Mm.
what's real versus what's not real conversation. And just to your earlier point about addressing it with younger kids, that kind of, the body parts, there's a very good cartoon by the NSPCC does called Pantosaurus. So I'd highly recommend. I used it with my kids to kind of get the message, the idea being that what's in your pants is only for you. And if anyone
Mm.
asks to see it, then, you say no and you tell a trusted adult. But it's very well done. It's very child friendly. It's very kind of appropriate and safe. So I'd recommend any parents, wanting to try and get those good messages across to look at the NSPCC campaign called
And
Pantosaurus.
just one thing on that. Your reaction to your child viewing pornography is crucially important here. So
Yeah.
approach all teenage issues or younger children issues with, calm curiosity. Do you know what I mean? It's really about not shaming their viewing. Like if a child feels I'm going to get in trouble for telling you that I saw this, they're not going to tell you. And you're in a far better position if they tell you what they've seen. And we know there's lots of sextortion scams where kids, young boys getting told to send nudes and then they're going, unless they send money, they're going to send this image to all of their friends and all these things that happen. You want your kid to be able to come to you when they have any of those experiences. And that's maybe not one conversation, that's a series of conversations all the way. But the the most important thing, I've said this for years and I say it every time, tell your kid if they ever come across anything online that they're troubled with, come to you. It doesn't mean you take the phone off them, but you will try and manage it. And if you can manage that with as little as hysteria as possible, even though inside you might be bursting to get upset about it.
Yeah.
The calm, supportive, kind of collaborative way of let's manage this, let's help you understand this. And again,
Yeah, we're in this together.
it's developmental, right? So the if a 22-year-old walks through a nightclub at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to be traumatized. You put a 9-year-old into a nightclub at 3 o'clock in the morning, they might well be. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just about the content, but the developmental exposure to that content. And if you have a child who's concerned about anything that they've seen, the most protective thing they can do is to come to you and you explain it in a way that makes sense for them to help them digest it. So that open door approachability, come to me and be calm, curious, and empathetic to your position is the best thing you can do in terms of protecting your child from pornography. All the parental control apps in the world are not as good as an approachable parent to go to if I find I'm struggling, you know.
And I think it's such a good point because we see in our data that when, about between 25 and 30% of children tell us that they've seen content that upset them in some way, bothered them, made them feel uncomfortable. And unfortunately, about a third of them don't tell anyone. They keep it to themselves. So I think we really do have to work hard to remind kids and to reassure kids that, that they can come and tell us, and, we will help them navigate through it, as you say, even if we're panicking inside, but that
Mm,
it is important that the idea that, because of course the sooner they come as well, the more likely it
mm.
is that you can respond and address the issue.
And what teenagers would say to me is that they tend to beg for the phone. Please buy me a phone, please buy me, and I'll do all
Yeah.
this. It's like buying a puppy. I'll walk it, and I'll do all these, and they make all these promises. But because we hand it over with trepidation, and in what you predicted as a parent going wrong has gone wrong, no child wants to go back to that parent and have the "I told you so" conversation. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So even when you're giving the phone under trepidation, stipulate at this point, come back to me if there's anything on this. I know you're asking for it. We don't really agree on the timing of it, but that doesn't matter. If anything comes up here that you're concerned about, you come to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a
It's
such an
not the
important
"I told you
message.
so."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so changing gears from pornography to problematic games and apps that children are using. And actually, for under 13s, we see that gaming is the most popular activity online that they can be doing. Are there any online apps or games that stand out to you as particularly problematic? Ones that are coming up in your conversations with children? Um, and yeah, like what would your concerns be around some of these?
But the first thing I'd say is that the age rating on games is there for a reason. Do you know what I mean? And for some reason, we've never really been able to get on top of this. We seem to give a child, 11-year-old, an over 18s game when we wouldn't allow them watch an over 18s movie. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so the the gaming capacity, I mean, I'm not entirely sure why that doesn't transfer into our psyche that's there for a reason. But what I would say to is the games you can have tr problems on all of the games. Like there's no real fail-safe one. But what I would say is the most issues that I have or I see, of course, the gaming design is about addiction. It's about, these are casino-based designs that keep you going, keep you on. There's an update coming, you have to be on for that. And the issues you're having with your child around trying to get them to come off the device, there's billions of money being pumped into the design of these games to keep them on, and children are being duped and hoodwinked into buying these skins, and it's only available for the next 3 hours. You have to buy it in this window or it'll be gone forever. And they'll because they're vulnerable, they'll be sucked into all of that sort of stuff. It's about completion of levels, and just 5 more minutes, and you'll win 60 stars or whatever it might be. Open this box, and you'll get all these things. So the design in itself is very dopamine agitating. It's very addictive, and it's very reliant on continual use. But the problem that I would see that's most difficult is the interactions and relationships that tend to happen on these games. So young people will be playing a very simplistic game. For example, I don't know, Rocket League is a simple game. It's like cars playing football. I know it sounds bananas, but it's cars bumping into a football and they score goals on either side. But say, for example, a young person misses a goal or something. These people on these headsets will start to say the most vile and horrendous things to them. Go kill yourself. You're used all like things you'd never say to somebody in face to face. And it can really have a devastating effect on children who are playing those games. They call each other names. They have these, and again, because it's disembodied, you're not looking someone in the eye. The level of abuse that is exchanged over and back is off the charts from that perspective. And I've seen many young boys become really upset or distressed by things that they were called or names that they were called. But every time they want to go online, they meet these characters all the time. And what I would say is, and I think we oftentimes, this is maybe something that we're a bit remiss at, if that's happening so regularly, some of our kids are the perpetrators of that stuff, that they're saying that to other children. And I think a useful thing for all of our parents, of all of us as parents, need to go and speak to our child and say, you do never speak to another kid like that. You do not and there will be consequences. We can't take, I always say this when it comes to bullying and exclusion, we can't take the not my Johnny approach. We have to make sure that our child isn't the one who's causing the difficulty. That's as much about teaching our own children about respecting other people and putting that investment in. And the fact that this is so prolific within these games, lots of children are doing it. And maybe they're doing it because the whole online gaming etiquette and the social communication issues but that's something we really need to be on top of. And as much as we talk about, we might talk about it later, like not bringing phones into the room and things like that, you need to be overhearing your child's gaming behavior as well, I'm not trying to say I'm perfect, far from it, but my kitchen downstairs looks like an internet cafe from 2006. There's PCs and screens all the way over along one wall, and the reason it's
Headsets and
there
yeah.
is for me it's horrendous from a feng shui or interior design perspective, but it's there because I want to hear how they're interacting with other people. And as parents, we are in charge of our own children's behavior in that way. And so as much as there's a gaming risk, there's a gaming responsibility. All like being online in a community where other people are there is not a human right. It is a responsibility. You earn the right by showing the responsibility. And children need to have a very clear idea that when you get on you have a responsibility to behave in this space too. And if you're not, there would have to be consequences for that or sanctions for it. But I would think that parents need to keep an ear out to their children, not only because they are a risk of being victims of other people, but they may also be at risk of being the perpetrators of upsetting other children as well. And I just think that's something we need to keep an ear out for as well.
So I think if I were to kind of summarize a couple of key points of what you were saying is, one is we have to work a lot harder to kind of on empathy with kids, because the screen, you know, in a lot of these cases, whether you're on Snapchat or Roblox or whatever, you know, you are losing that eye contact, the ability to see kind of how your words are impacting on someone. So I think we have to work harder to foster empathy, but also keep them where you can see them. Yeah, I think that's such a good piece of advice, because if they're in their bedroom with the door shut and the headset on, you as the parent or carer are completely excluded from what they're doing, who they're talking to, you know, what's being said to them, and all of that. So I think that's really, really important advice. I want to just touch on another area that you've been writing about in recent times, which is generative AI. And I know that this is kind of the hot topic, and it's obviously the evolving technology, but it's increasingly a feature in our children's lives. Chatbots, the companion apps, and so on, and unfortunately even things like notification apps and tools. We reported in our last report that 26% of 8 to 12-year-olds and 36% of 12 to 15-year-olds were engaging with AI chatbots. And just looking at our data this year, that's numbers increasing so much. So it's an increasingly big part of their lives. So it's coming up in some of the questions as a concern and challenge for parents, and that they're worried about it, particularly these kind of AI chatbots and virtual boyfriends and girlfriends. Some are concerned about schoolwork even, and, you know, the idea is that it's going to impact on their children's learning. What advice do you have for parents on this area of generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it's the hot topic. My belief is it's not hot topic enough. I don't think we're
Yeah.
thinking about this near enough, right? So the AI's potential is phenomenal for what impact it will have on us as human beings. And I don't sound that just doesn't isn't meant to sound hyperbolic, but I've been on this road of technology awareness since 2011. That's when I started this, and you know when I did my PhD, Alex, it was Facebook and YouTube. That's all I had to go with. You know, we had Snapchat, all those things hadn't come on stream yet. But back then, I remember how romanticized we were about technology. We were like, oh my God, look, I can see our cousin's pictures in Australia. And oh my God, this little iPod can carry 1,000 songs. Imagine 1,000 CDs in this little thing, right? And we were the honeymoon phase of that. We didn't think down the line what the consequences of it were. And here we are, 15 years later, and we're living with the consequences of those decisions then. And like at that time when I was going around trying to say this, like this pornography stuff and all, people were saying you're hysterical, you're a gloom merchant, you know, all that sort of stuff. But the speculation turns true. I really worry about our AI reaction at the moment. Oh my God, look, it can do a whole presentation, or I can write my essays and I can humanize my essay, and I don't, you know, and it can create an image of all of these things. This technology is so powerful. It is breathtaking. And it is 2025, last year, historians will look back at last year not as an advance in AI, but a psychological turning point, right? It took Instagram 2 years to build up 100 million followers. It took ChatGPT 2.5 months, right? That's how quick this adoption has happened. I'm seeing teenagers and young people all the time. They're bouncing everything off ChatGPT. Rouse with their friends, ask ChatGPT. Stress at the family, getting assignments, doing my homework. The AI agent is producing all of that stuff, and that's a real concern because there's no learning in that, right? Our human relationships occur through friction. Like you learn to be adaptable by people who don't agree with you. You know, you learn to emotionally grow through frustration and boredom and all of these things. And the AI is able to bypass all of that stuff. So children's real core developmental stuff is being missing. But here's the big issue. Children and teenagers are saying to me, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what is real, right? Go back evolutionary. We have been trained, our brains neurologically, to believe our eyes. You know, if you see something, that's pretty conclusive that that's what happened. We can't do that now. You can see the Queen of England fighting an alligator, and, you know, is that real? You know, is that AI? And what's happening is children are becoming incredibly cynical. Oh, that's AI. That's AI. And so this spotting AI has become this kind of thing. And, you know, it's not necessarily just about critical thinking. This is way bigger than that. Because what AI has brought in is a situation where human effort begins and ends, we can't tell. So I have a young man who's doing exams at the moment, and he says, there's no point in doing a really good job because the teacher will just think you got it from ChatGPT. Let me give you an example. A husband and wife have an argument, right? And the husband goes away and he comes back and he says, I'm really sorry. I thought about what I did. I didn't take your feelings into account. I've done some work on it. I've reflected on it. I know what I did wrong. I apologize. It won't happen again. I love you. I care about you. You're the most important person in the world. His wife is delighted with this apology. Then she finds out he got that from ChatGPT. How much does the apology mean now? Do you know what I mean? Scenario B, another man goes off and thinks about it, comes back and stumbles through a similar apology. I'm sorry. I didn't think your feelings. I won't happen again. You're important to me. I love you. And the wife thinks he got it from ChatGPT. So the idea of we can't tell where human effort begins and ends, and so that erosion of trust has become a real part of our process. Children can't believe they can't trust their eyes, they can't trust their peers. So what does society look like if we can't trust each other? Do you know what I mean? And it's this that's the society that our children are going to inhabit. Now I understand this sounds maybe a little bit wacky, but genuinely, I have huge concerns of what AI will do to human relationships, in terms of
Yeah.
what is authentic and what is not. And in that situation, we really need to ground our children in real life relationships. That in a world where the truth is drifting along, human anchors are the key. Real friendships, real relationships. Somebody to tell you, this is real, I'm real, I'm saying this. And so when we talk about the screen-based childhood has taken over the play-based childhood, it has never been more important for us to bring the play-based childhood back. With AI coming downstream, that is going to be the buffer that children are going to need more than anything else. Do you know what I mean? In terms of that grounding in what is in reality. Um, and yeah, I think we have a huge onus of responsibility as parents, teachers, governments to keep children, because it's not going to be an argument about screen time. It's going to be an argument about protecting reality. That's the next 10 years. And so, sorry, you asked me that question and I went off on one, but it's the Gen
No, no,
AI
but
stuff.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
but
worry.
I think it is a worry, and I think there's a lot we need to do around the regulating of it as well. The fact
Mm.
that it is so unregulated and so accessible to children is deeply problematic. So of course that's something that we need to address. But I just wanted to, as a final question that I'm going to ask you, because I'm sure there's a couple of questions that from the audience that Philip will want to bring in just before and I'm conscious of time. But you talked about alternatives, to being online, and you've written about, we need more alternatives to kids. And addiction came up a lot in the questions. And I wondered if you could maybe just reflect a bit on, obviously we've talked about the addictive nature of these things, but it's obviously an experience that parents are having in relation to their kids, like struggling to get them off, but feeling like they're spending way too much time. Could you maybe speak to that a little bit and talk about, that need for the alternatives that you've talked about in some of your written pieces?
Yeah, I mean, addiction is as much a social problem as it is a chemical one, right? So we know about the neuroscience around dopamine and how that can feed us to continue behaviors. But if you just humor me for a moment, there was a study on addiction years ago where they put a rat in a cage and they gave some heroin and some water, and the rat went over and kept taking the heroin and it died. And that was kind of the format of this is how addiction works. It's a physical thing. But a guy called Bruce Alexander looked at that experiment and said, it's flawed. You left the rat there on its own. So he built what he called Rat Park. And he put spinning wheels and other rats and straw and food, and he put the heroin and the water. And hardly any of the rats took the heroin. Do you know what I mean? So we need to, almost creating this social world, something else that I can do. I still believe children want to be together rather than being on their own, right?
Yeah.
But the technology is trying to create a situation where we are physically distant and virtually dependent. Think about two 14-year-olds who want to play a game. years ago in the 90s, if you and I were playing the Super Nintendo, Alex, we'd be sitting down with two joysticks side by side, leaning into each other playing. Now, if you and I wanted to play, we both have to go to our own homes to play in isolation because we can't play together. That's not by design. Or that's not by accident, that's by design.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
by design.
technology companies want us in these siloed, virtually dependent spaces. The counter to that is offering spaces where children can gather. I still believe that we need to bring back the youth club. I think it's a traditional solution to a contemporary problem, where children and teenagers can go and hang out and be in spaces together. Because what's happened is we have we've removed the opportunity for children to gather, and we have created, and there's reasons for that. Like in Ireland, the consequence of the rise of technology happened at the same time. So most of us who are parents now grew up in the 80s, 90s, right? And in that time, we had all the clerical abuse scandals in Ireland. We had Philip Kearns, we had these disappearing children. We had Madeleine McCann, right? Which is absolutely in our psyches around child protection. At the same time, we were given devices where we could entertain our children in the proximity of their room, and they could have that. And we thought that was the safe option because, but what we're doing is we're overprotecting our children in the real world and underprotecting them in
Yeah.
the online world. And that's and what I would like to see is a reverse of that. I want children in the 1990s, 14-year-olds were babysitters. In 2026, a 14-year-old needs a babysitter. Do you know what I mean? And so the idea around that is that children are not getting older, younger. They're being exposed to older stuff at a younger age, and that's different, And so, from my perspective, it is about creating villages and communities. Because I was given independence as a kid to go off on my BMX and go in the morning and come back at night. But when I went out, there was a whole village of people watching me. There was 50 sets of eyes. So my parents were safe in the knowledge that I was being watched, and if anything went wrong, I was near people. We don't live in that world anymore, but we
Mm.
could if we created real life communities. And I would say one thing, and I promise I'll stop at this. Socialization is something that we should all be doing all the time, right? And here's a public servant announcement to all the parents on this call. This is one thing I really want you to stop doing. Stop celebrating when plans are cancelled. Right. Because what you're doing is you're telling your child socialization is a chore that should be avoided. We need to be with other people. Children need to be with other people. They need to have the freedom to spend time with that rich communication in actual grounded, connected relationships. That makes the offline or the online world way less appealing. But if they have nothing else, that becomes their isolative kind of space. And so when we talk about addiction, addiction is almost a life issue as much as it is a technological issue. And we need to create spaces for children to do something else. And we need government to come in on this. The most happiest children and the least tech dependent children in the world are in Holland. Holland have after school clubs, they have spaces, they have all of these wonderful opportunities for children, which are government funded to spend time off screens. If you're telling your kid, come off your screen, and they say to do what, and you say to tidy your room, it ain't gonna work. We have to compete with the device. And where we compete and we win is with face-to-face, eye contact, human, touch-related communication. Bring that back, we have a chance. Sorry, I'll stop there now. Thanks.
No, that's brilliant. Well, I'm gonna stop asking questions. Philip, is there a couple of
There
questions
is,
for you?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Fantastic discussion. It's always such a shame to have to switch my camera back on. I'm sure a few hearts sank when they saw me come back on the screen. But also just a fascinating conversation. And thank you to both of you. Just a note on the youth club. There's actually a fantastic book called Up the Youth Club by a journalist called Emma Warren, all about the joy of youth clubs. A few people were jumping in there saying, I remember youth clubs. And actually, I noticed an article recently in the Guardian there about in the UK, they're now looking at refunding and bringing back youth club spaces and that kind of thing. So that's a really positive thing to see, and part of perhaps this bigger societal shift that we're starting perhaps to see a little bit towards more analog things and perhaps getting a bit more digital balance. I'm conscious just of the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop a message to thank everyone into the chat. I would encourage you to go to cybersafekids.ie and have a look at our essential digital parenting guide. There's a lot more information, advice, and guidance that you can find in that guide as well. But also, if Colman would give us maybe just 10 minutes more of his
Hmm.
time, we can hang on and just answer a couple more questions. So I'm just going to pop that into the chat. And what I've tried to do, Coleman, is just pull out 2 or 3 questions. We had a few on the Q&A, which I was able to hopefully answer. And if anyone's wanting to see the webinar or share it with anyone in your community, it'll be on the website from tomorrow morning. So again, please go to cybersafekids.ie and you can find that there. So the first question, Coleman, I've got 3 and I've tried to combine one into sort of a big Medusa-like question where there's sort of bits, but they're all kind of related. But the first one's very practical, very simple. Someone was asking, could you recommend a book on healthy intimate relationships for young people, something that could give parents maybe guidance around, how to talk about those kind of things and what healthy relationships look like? Is there something that springs to mind?
Nothing that springs to mind. I mean, again, I, I, I understand a book that would help a parent to describe or to have that conversation with a child is useful. I don't think giving a child a book about that is necessarily, in the world that they live in, I don't know whether they'd read it. But it's less is more. Like with this conversation, it is. You're trying to fill the gaps of what pornography doesn't cover. It doesn't cover emotionality. It doesn't cover investment. It doesn't cover trust. It doesn't cover, time, effort. It doesn't cover respect. So what you're saying is that in a relationship with somebody, it's built over time. It's a consistency. It's an attraction. It's a comfort. Intimacy is something protective, not always something that's, extreme. And what you're almost, I think children would learn more from real life parents. See the way dad and I mix, or your 2 cousins who have wives or whatever, giving them relatable examples of what a healthy relationship looks like that they can see in their world. Um, the intimacy stuff, again, I think that I would add that in as they're older. But it's curiosity and empathy. They're the 2 things. If you go in and say, "What do you want to know? What is your opinion of? What do you think a healthy relationship looks like?" Because they'll say to you, "I know all this." Well, then tell me about it. You tell me. And you'll find out that they maybe don't. I don't have a book offhand that I think could work there. I might write one, but in terms of that, it is giving them real life examples that they, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I would point to the things that are more healthy within their world than the pornography image or message that's been sent there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Well, we'll definitely be buying that book once it's written. So we look forward to that coming out at some point in the future. The next question has kind of got a few facets, but I mean, I'll try and make it as sort of clear as possible. Really, the questions were kind of around the age, and I know that we've all had this question. I know it's a tricky one to answer, but I think one of the people who asked the questions very specifically said, "Don't fob me off with this. It depends on the child." So we're going to try and navigate that obstacle as best we can. But just generally around like the age for holding off with smartphone ownership, and particularly also then someone was asking about kind of age related screen time, like what is age related amount of screen time in terms of appropriacy for that age. And then I thought just one kind of postscript to that was that one parent was asking actually about older kids, almost like 16, 17, 18, around once you have the phone and the ownership, how do you keep that out of the bedrooms? Are there any practical tips about that as well? Sorry, there's a few parts to that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to try and give a more tangible answer than it depends on the child, right? So just bear with me. Think about technology use like food, right? There are good foods and there's not so good foods, right? So measurement, the metric of screen time isn't a good indicator of your child's relationship with technology because not all screen time is equal, right? We've all spent the last hour and 5 minutes on this call. It's screen time. But if you spend the next hour, looking at all mantelpieces that Marion in number 49 has or whatever and feel awful about yourself, the screen time will only say an hour each. It's not going to distinguish between the two. So we need to think about time spent and time well spent, right? And they're 2 different things. But children are entitled to have, we don't want a child to have a donutless life. Have a donut, enjoy, but in moderation. Just don't have donuts for breakfast, dinner, and tea, right? So let's extend that food and think about a technological diet, right? You don't measure your child's diet by the amount of time they spend sitting at the table. You measure their diet by what they eat, right? And so for that lady who said, what age? Here's the thing. Don't think about age, think about readiness, right? If your child can go a day, if they were left for the whole day or 2 days on their own at home, what would they eat, right? If your child would get up and have cereal for their breakfast and some toast, maybe and a cup of tea, they might have an apple and a bar at 11 o'clock. At lunchtime, they'll make themselves a sandwich and maybe a bit of soup and a packet of crisps. They'll have an apple at around 4 o'clock. At dinner time, they'll cook themselves something nice, some pasta and some meat or whatever. They might have another snack later, a cup of tea and a biscuit before they go to bed. If your kid can do that, they can regulate their own diet. So they might be ready for the online world. If your kid would get up and eat Oreos and Weetabix until you come home, they can't regulate their diet. If they can't regulate their diet, they cannot regulate their online usage, right? And so they're not ready. So when I talk about children, there are some 14-year-olds who you'd feel they'd be very sensible in the online world. There's 18-year-olds that I know who I have grave concerns about being in the online world, right? There's no age that once you pass that, you're good, right? There's certainly ages, I think, if you're under that, it's not good. But from the point of view of it's about readiness. And again, I would say, go back to that point, being online is not a right, or having a smartphone isn't a right, it's a responsibility. And you earn the right by showing the responsibility. Does that make sense? And so if you give a child a phone and they seem sensible, but I'll give you an example. If you want your kid in during the summer at 8 o'clock and they want to stay out till 10, make this deal. Come in at 8 o'clock on time, no arguments, no rows for 3 nights, and I'll push it to 8:15. Come in at 8:15 for the next 3 nights, no arguments, no rows, on time, we push it to 8:30. So what you're doing is you're giving them, show me the responsibility and you earn rights, not the other way around. It's not about saying, we don't say to a child, here's 2 liters of ice cream, have at it and come back to me when you vomit. We say this is a portion and we teach them how to manage it. So as your child is managing their technological usage and they show their readiness, they can earn more time. If they don't, they earn less. And again, think about the diet. If your kid's going to be Oreos and Weetabix, maybe they're not ready for the online world yet. If they can manage it sensibly, then maybe they are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, look, just in the interest of time, I think probably we're going to wrap up. You've talked there about food, so I'm gonna finish just by asking you about your three key takeaways, and I don't mean obviously Chinese or any other type of cuisine. Just in terms of what three things can anyone in attendance or who's watching this back, if they forget everything else or every other strategy or tactic fails, and they're really feeling overwhelmed, like what three key things would you give them as pieces of advice to manage this problem as best they can?
Okay, first one is collectively delay ownership as long as you can. Try and create that no pressure environment. And the reason I'm saying that is keep your child in discovery mode as long as they can. Hold off the defensive mode because developmentally, the longer they're in that, the more sense of self they will have before they enter into a world that's going to put that sense of self under pressure. That's number one. Number two, think about this when the child spends time online, it's not just about what are they doing online, but what are they not doing while they're online. Because what is a huge issue that we need to have a sense of is opportunity cost. The cost of when I'm online 36 hours a week, that is a full-time job. What am I not learning? Where's my social exposure, my social communication, my resilience, my able to repair relationships, my human skills, my formal skills of being able to manage conversations, answering a phone, all that sort of stuff. So think of opportunity cost rather than just what they're doing online, but what are they not doing while they're online? And the last one, and this is the most important one, value connection, real life, physical play. Like we are seeing the first group of young people who didn't grow up on the road, on the street, or on the green. And what we're seeing in that 18 to 30 population is the consequences of not having that exposure. The phone removes that opportunity to have that exposure. We need children to play together, to be around other people. to compete with the screen. And with the AI age of illusion coming down the line, we need our children even more grounded in human, close, actual real life relationships as possible. So let's bring back that play-based childhood and keep it as tight and as visible and even more so than ever before in order to protect. Again, this isn't about changing the technology. It's about building a child that's able to negotiate it. And that would be my third one. Connection, opportunity cost, delayed ownership, discovery mode. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for coming this evening and to those of you who've stayed around. Coleman, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of extra time. Thank you also to Alex for a really fascinating conversation. It's always a shame to have to kind of end these conversations because I know we could go on and on and on, but maybe it's better to leave people wanting a little bit more. So if you'd like to find out a little bit more about the Same Rules Apply campaign and access our essential digital parenting booklet, you can find it here at the QR code. You can also go to cybersafekids.ie and you'll find it on that homepage there. And there's also a Same Rules Apply page if you want to rewatch the video again as well. And the webinar will be, a recording of the webinar will be up from tomorrow. So it just remains for me to say thank you to all of you. Thank you again, Dr. Colman Noctor and Alex Cooney, and from CyberSafeKids. Thank you. Have a good evening. And hopefully this evening it'll be a device-free one after this webinar.